I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Again, I want to welcome you here to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun projects some people have heard of, such as Superman Legion of Superheroes, such as X-Men, Sword of the Braddocks. But most importantly for today, I'm going to say Justice League of America, where I once actually drew President Obama, of all things. But enough about that. My current love is my t-shirt company, Kirby Tees. You can check out what we've got to offer over there, as well as consider getting a custom t-shirt or even purchasing a Retro Rogues Live t-shirt and supporting the show here. I know Eric and I would both greatly appreciate your support. But enough about that. I want to welcome back Eric Alexander, my great co-host. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Yes, hello everyone. I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God, not Bass God. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And in addition to being the co-host of Retro Rogues Live, I am the chief financial officer of a small production company in Arizona called Bad Bob Productions. And as has been my custom lately, we're in the middle of a crowdfunder. And so I wanted to share with everybody how we're doing on that crowdfunder for the film Staycation. Now, this is a really interesting project for folks that haven't, watched the show before. We're basically doing a short film that is going to constitute about 25% of a feature film. This film is being directed by Russ Emanuel. I worked with Russ Emanuel on a feature film called Occupants, which, by the way, unfortunately is not available anywhere right now. Apparently, that there's some shuffling going on. It was available on Tubi, but it's not available anywhere right now that I'm aware of. But it was a feature film that Russ and I worked on. In fact, Dave actually did the official comic book tie-in for the film Occupants. And Russell has come up with this really interesting premise, basically, where we're basically doing a short film that is going to constitute, like I said, a quarter of an actual feature film. And where we're at right now is we basically had a lot of costs associated with the COVID regulations. We filmed this thing back in November, mid-November, over in Burbank in Hollywood. And it was a really interesting experience, but it was also really daunting because we had to deal with all those COVID regulations. We had to have a COVID coordinator. We were all masked up, all that kind of stuff. But I am happy to say that we have reached our goal. We're over our goal. So as of today, all right, there are 369 backers. We're looking at $29,318 and that's, a goal that was 20,000. And Russ is really hoping to get 30,000. We've got 10 days left in the campaign. We're really hoping that we're going to make it over that. I think we will because we have plenty of time. We've got 10 days in the campaign. So please just check it out. We talk about this all the time. Support independent film, independent creations, things like that. There's a lot of people out there. They constantly obviously criticize, right? And we're going to be doing some of that tonight. I mean, that's part of the point, right? We're going to be criticizing some stuff tonight. We're not going to probably agree on everything. Dave and I disagree a lot of times about different shows and movies and things like that. And we're probably going to get into it a little bit. But you know what? We're also kind of putting our money where our mouth is, like literally. We are doing our own stuff. Dave does a comic book called Red Skirts. That's his creation along with his partner, Al. I'm doing Staycation, which actually involves a lot of people. It's kind of interesting. This is independent film, but we've got a lot of people involved with this. And obviously with the crowdfunder, there's even more. There's over 300 backers on this thing already. So I am going to go ahead and just share the link with everybody out there. So let me go ahead and do that if I can get on the comments here. So that is not spam that just came out on the in the chat. Oh, and hey, look who's in the house. Dave, my partner, Robert McVeigh. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good to see you, Robert. Robert, we got to get Robert on the show at some point, for sure, I think. Robert is actually my partner with Bad Bob Productions. I like to say that Dave and I, we sold out to ourselves. the official sponsors of this show are Kirby Tees, which Dave was talking about earlier. That's Dave's company, his t-shirt company, and Bad Bob Productions, which is my company that I co-own with Robert McVeigh. Robert is my partner in that, and my partner in Staycation. And we actually were involved with the behind the scenes filming and photography for Staycation. That's one of the big things that Robert did on set. And actually, that's one of the perks. I usually go through a couple of the perks on here, but there's actually a stretch goal on here, and I think it's already been reached. So it's like it's like 25,000, I think, is the stretch goal that has been reached. And let's see, it says, I can't find it. I apologize for that, but I know there's a stretch goal on here. Well, we've got a stretch goal number 3 at 35,000, but there's an additional stretch goal I know where it's actually the reward is basically the footage that Robert did of our sort of like zombie and the transformation of the makeup. That's actually one of the perks. I wish I could find it. It's one of the stretch goals. And then as far as the perks go, I did want to mention a couple here. So it starts out at $3. You don't really get anything for that. But after that, it kind of just goes up. And for $11, you can get a digital download of the film. And then also, I always try to push this one because Dave actually worked on this micro short called Routine. And Routine is considered the prequel to Staycation. This is a 5-minute micro short. And for $51, you'll get a copy of that as well. A lot of these perks, they stack on each other. So like at the $51 mark, you're going to get digital copies of both films, both Staycation when it's finished and Routine, which is already finished. And then at around $57, you can get a DVD copy of Staycation, and you're also going to get a copy of that film Routine, which is basically like an experimental micro short that Dave actually worked on. He did this amazing artwork that actually helps tell the story. It's actually, you don't have the film if you don't see Dave's artwork. Like, you don't get the story. A lot of it happens through the artwork. It's a really cool thing. So anyway, I just want to put it out there. Everybody just, obviously support independent film, support independent stuff. And that's all I got.
Very cool. Very cool. I apologize. I was running around like a madman here. I was not going to go live actually on the video tonight, but I'm going to do it just briefly because I want to talk about a couple things here just real quick. Starting on next episode, we're going to start giving away actually some signed comic books. This one's kind of hard to tell. I should probably take this out of the bag. And the way it's going to work is basically just if you come on basically the show, post in the Rogues Gallery, the comment section, and you'll be entered into a drawing. So this is actually a Captain America comic book, and this is actually signed by Steve Rude. So we're going to be doing some fun giveaways starting with next week's episode. So I just want to plug that real quick.
And I've met Steve Rude. I've actually worked with him several times back in the old days of the Phoenix Comic Con, and he's a really awesome guy, and he does some really amazing artwork. So definitely I think people, you should check it out. If you're not aware of Steve Rude, he's a great artist.
Yeah, and in addition to that too, I actually have some books that I have actually worked on too. And I've talked about I'm going to start getting things CGC graded. So one of the things I'm going to work on doing is actually getting some basically CGC graded signed books by me that I worked on, such as Justice League, the new Stormwatch DC series, Grifter, that kind of stuff. We're going to be giving this away on the show too, as well as returning to giving away the sketch cards too. We kind of had some interruptions and things that's kind of caused us to have to kind of shuffle things around a little bit in terms of what we want to do. But starting next week, we're going to get back on the horse with getting all this stuff running again. And just want to encourage people, please come into the comment section and comment. So
absolutely. And speaking of the Rogues Gallery in the comment section, Hollywood Jackson is in the house, and he says, "Hi guys, it's good to see you, Hollywood Jackson. Always a pleasure when we get to hear from you, and please be vocal out there in the Rogues Gallery, and definitely tell us what your thoughts are on anything that we're talking about." And then Robert has a few comments, and he had mentioned, and I actually forgot this, so I appreciate Rob reminding me about this. And again, Robert is my partner with Bad Bob Productions, and he mentioned that Friday at the Chandler Film Festival, at 7:30, they are going to be showing Routine. So the Chandler Film Festival is a local festival here it's going to be in Chandler, Arizona. And it's starting on, actually it starts officially tomorrow. I think they have one film, like opening ceremony type thing tomorrow. But on Friday, that film I was talking about, the one that Dave worked on, the micro short Routine, that's actually going to be shown at 7:30. Now, if you don't want to go to the festival, or you can't go to the festival, and there's obviously lots of reasons, whether it's your distance or whether because you just don't want to go out, which I totally understand because a lot of people are not comfortable going out right now. The neat thing about the Chandler Film Festival is they're not just doing it at an actual theater, they're also doing it online, which a lot of film festivals are only online right now. But Chandler Film Festival is doing both. So they have a physical location. There's a Hawkins in downtown Chandler where they'll be showing a lot of these films, but they're also doing a virtual as well. So it's the horror shorts program. That's what Routine is part of. So just realize that it might be a little difficult to find it because it is in a shorts program. But if you're interested and you want to see the film, you can see it at Chandler Film Festival. And actually, Russ is supposed to be in town. For people that are local in Arizona or the Chandler area, Russ is supposed to be in town, and he's actually planning to attend that screening on Friday at Chandler Film Festival.
Well, very cool. That's very cool. And yeah, I'm excited for hopefully more people to continue to see Routine. It's actually been winning some awards, and I think that's really cool. And I hope people enjoy it. It's ironic, Eric, because I still technically haven't seen Routine. That's the irony of ironies. I still haven't seen it. So
yeah, it's kind of funny because I have a special thanks credit on Routine because I'm the one who introduced Dave and Russ in the first place. So Russ was kind enough to give me a special thanks credit on the film. And so they also, Russ invited me to the Zoom premiere. He did a premiere via Zoom because this film came out right in the middle of the lockdown. In fact, that's part of the experimental nature of the film, is that it was shot with the full lockdown going on. Basically, when they weren't allowed to even shoot anything in LA, Russ did this. So I got a chance to watch it because I went to the Zoom premiere. But yeah, unfortunately, Dave didn't make it, which I think is
that's wrong. True. Yeah. Story of my life.
But you can see it now at Chandler Film Festival, Dave.
Yeah.
So
yeah, right. So on tonight's show, let's go ahead and plug just real quick. We're talking about, we usually try to do it at the top of the show. We are going to be talking about Wandavision episodes 1 and 2, and doing some basic reviews and talk, a little bit of spoiler conversation. I talk about it as we get further into the episode. And then outside of that, we also typically always do a pop culture news segment. We've got a lot of interesting things I want to talk about. I have a Moon Knight update, everybody. That's right, more Moon Knight news. And I got a couple fun Moon Knight things I actually want to show off on the show tonight, which is why I decided to turn my camera on. And then...
and I have a Snydercut update for
there you go. Culture. Yeah, and then we've got some interesting streaming wars stuff. So definitely stay tuned for the show and hang around here as we talk about WandaVision. So we're going to start off talking about the new Disney Plus show, WandaVision, and they did release episodes 1 and 2. There is kind of a bit of a companion series for this too, which I do want to touch on when we get into the spoiler part of it. They have a Legends series that they actually launched too, and they're kind of short, and they kind of catch you up or recap you on the characters. They have one that focuses on Vision. They have one that obviously focuses on, basically Scarlet Witch or Wanda Maximoff, and kind of catch you up.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's called Legends. It's on Disney Plus. If you go to the Marvel tab, you can find it over there. But it is intended to be kind of like a catch-up. And I'm kind of glad to see that they're doing this because there's so much content now with the MCU that it might be difficult for some people who may be curious about something because they hear something about it, and it may be a little daunting, for them to get into. And what the Legends series reminded me of is I've talked about on the show how much I love Marvel Saga. And or the Marvel Saga, and that was kind of the same thing, but it was in comic book form, back in the late 80s and 90s, and that would kind of catch you up on Marvel Comics history, and that was really fun. So that's what this Legend series is for. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit too. And then I'm going to talk about this crazy deep dive I did where I watched a whole bunch of the movies trying to piece a bunch of stuff together. And I'm still as confused as when I started. Because I watched a ton of stuff trying to see if I could find any relevance for what's happening in the show. But let's start off by talking about our initial impressions of WandaVision, episodes 1 and 2. Eric, why don't you go ahead and go first? Again, we're going to avoid spoilers. Just talk about your general impressions, what you thought about the first 2 episodes. Go ahead and tell us what you thought.
Well, I'm confused. There's no doubt about it. This is a confusing show. I think it's meant to be a confusing show. It's obviously a genre buster. It's hard to kind of hard to define, right? Because essentially what it is like a show within a show. It's not a spoiler, I don't think, to tell people that, basically Wanda, Scarlet Witch and Vision are, for reasons we don't understand, basically like trapped in a sitcom. And it's very like, I guess the biggest influences are obviously like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. There's very much like that kind of vibe to the show that they're like trapped in. Interestingly enough, I'd heard a bunch of stuff about Dick Van Dyke being like a consultant on this show. And honestly, I'm not feeling a lot of the Dick Van Dyke show in this show, like at all. It's definitely more like Bewitched, I would say, and I Dream of Jeannie. I definitely do get that vibe from the show, which again is like a show within the show. It's very confusing. So I'm kind of confused by it. And I've actually put this out there. I put this out there on Twitter. I put this out on my Clapper account. I've got a Clapper account now. And I actually got a pretty good response by saying this. But this is basically my opinion is there's only one of two ways this show is going to go. Either it's going to be kind of like, in my opinion, it's either going to be like kind of really frustrating and confusing to watch. And you're going to get like this incredibly amazing payoff at the end of the show. And you're going to be like, oh, that's what's going on. That's what this all is. Oh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. And obviously it's going to lead into something. People are saying it's going to lead into like the Doctor Strange movie and the multiverse and all that kind of stuff. And so it's either going to be, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion. It's either going to be like you're going to be on this sort of roller coaster of trying to figure out what's going on. It's going to be confusing as hell, and there's going to be this great payoff, or this is going to be a colossal waste of time.
That is definitely an interesting perspective to have. Here is my initial take on WandaVision. How do I put this?
How do you put this?
Let me just say that having watched the first 2 episodes, I know the episodes are going to get better, but my initial thought of it is I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity in the first 2 episodes. And let me explain why. I feel like the first 2 episodes miss a very important component about what makes the MCU movies and all the content fun. And that's kind of the action. Now, I understand that they're trying to do like a salute to sitcoms. And I also, too, because I'm a longtime comic book reader, I read the Vision and Scarlet Witch series back in the day. And I know it starts off with them having a house and they have kids. And it's this kind of like this sort of domestic thing. And where did the kids come from? And I get all that. I totally get all that. Okay. So it's not like that's lost on me. Okay. But where I feel like it's a missed opportunity is because, and I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit, Eric, because I feel like the first episode is very much Dick Van Dyke, the first episode. Now,
Really?
the second episode, if you watch it, is very clearly supposed to be Bewitched. When you watch the intro segment and everything, definitely the second one is intended to be Bewitched. Now here's what I mean by missed opportunity, okay? I have watched both of these episodes a total of 3 times. Okay, the second viewing, I fell asleep during both of them, which is why I had to watch it 3 times. So here's kind of my thing.
Wow.
On the third viewing of these, trying to see if there's something I'm missing, okay, all I kept thinking to myself was, what a shame that they did not have Vision, quote unquote, have his superhero secret identity. and they could have also done a salute to the Adventures of Superman with George Reeves.
Oh.
And then you could have had the Marvel action segment, because the first episode could end with them kind of like that kiss on the couch, and then all of a sudden they see this thing on the TV, and he's like, "I've got to go to work" or something, and you see him kind of turn to Vision, and then he does like the run and the jump out the window, and then in the second episode it could start off with Vision fighting kind of a classic Vision villain like the Grim Reaper. And it's interesting too, because there is a nod to Grim Reaper in that Bewitched opening credit sequence. You blink and you miss it, but it looks like they have a shape that looks like the Grim Reaper's helmet, actually like stuck inside the house, like it's like in the floorboard or something. It was really interesting. It was really interesting to see all of this, and I just kept thinking, it's like, I just wish they had put a little bit more of that in it. I mean, I didn't hate them. It's not like that, but it was a little strange experience for me, because I kind of felt like they were going to have a little bit more of that kind of in it. Because here's my thing, and this is just my opinion. Again, nobody, throw too many things at me for saying this, but I prefer when they do this kind of content that they nod to the comics, and then they nod to the history of this particular, like, for example, comic book inspired characters in other media. Okay. Yeah. And if they had done that, even though Adventures of Superman is a DC thing, it would have been an interesting way for them to kind of nod to the early years of, super heroics on television. You know what I mean? And kind of sprinkle just a little bit of it, to kind of nod to that again, kind of trying to come full circle. So that's kind of my only thing. I just felt like on the third rewatching of these two episodes, I felt like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity. So that's my initial hot take. I'm not hating it, but at the same point, I'm really curious to see, and I agree with you on this though, Eric. I do believe that it's either going to be a huge, crazy payoff, or it's going to be frustrating. Like watching Iron Fist frustrating, just with no kung fu.
Now, I never actually saw Iron Fist, so I can't relate to that. But definitely, like I said, I feel like it's going to be one extreme or the other. Like there's going to be like this crazy awesome payoff at the end, or this is just going to be like, whoo. But we do have a comment in the Rogue Gallery, a really good one, I think, actually. John McClay says, I grew up watching shows like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and the like. I felt they nailed the feeling of those shows, and my thought is that it's going to continue down that path through the decades, slowly revealing a deeper, interesting plot. He goes on to say, I also applaud Marvel for taking the chance to make such a different kind of superhero show.
And that's a great perspective to have. Like Eric said, this is definitely a genre buster. This is definitely them attempting to do something really bold and unique and new. And like I said, I think that it's going to be, as we get into the spoilers, we'll get a little bit deeper into it, because there is some interesting things that are going on in here. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they do this, because I'm really curious if they're going to be able to pay off the novelty and the uniqueness of where the premise, like kind of like how it starts. Because, Marvel's got an incredible track record of really being able to really kind of shock and surprise and really kind of wow people. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to evolve. I'm still enjoying the series. It's not that I don't like the series, but that was my only thought, is I just felt like I wish, because some of the Marvel characters, such as Captain America, for example, was in a set of movie serials going back to the 40s, so the kind of more, I guess, a timely character at the time, but some of these other characters have been adapted into different forms that kind of goes back to that old era of the first time of trying to adapt superheroes, to live action. And that was my only thought, is just, I wish they had just done a little bit of that. But it's still an interesting idea, and we'll see if they're able to pull it off. We'll see if they're able to pull it off.
Going back to what John said, I do agree with you, John, that I think that they are going to have this sort of path where they go through the decades, just based on the stuff that I've read. I don't know any particular spoilers or anything like that. Like, I don't know anything beyond these first 2 episodes that I've seen, but it's my understanding that's exactly what they're going to do. The problem with that, I think, is going to be, I've seen comments where people are already like, they love this show, and that's fine. But because it's going to kind of evolve and change, I wonder how that's going to affect the fans. Like, if you really like what's going on right now, and all of a sudden they sort of change the premise and they switch to like a different show, like even you were talking about, Dave, like, the possibility of maybe sort of, doing some nods to an old superhero show or something like that. Like, for instance, you mentioned this, the Superman television show, or, they're possibly, down the line, maybe they could do something like, Batman or something like that, or even the Incredible Hulk, who knows, they could definitely do that. The problem that I'm kind of wondering is going to, that might happen is, if you're liking what you're seeing now and then the show changes, are you still going to like the show?
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective to see if people can hang with the changes. Because, well, let's go ahead and get into some spoiler talk, if that's okay. Because if we go too much further, we're going to start indirectly spoiling things. So
Okay.
At this point, we're going to be talking spoilers again for WandaVision episodes 1 and 2. Let's go ahead and start off talking about just about the first episode. I'm going to read the synopsis here real quick. The first episode, which is just called episode 1, is Wanda and Vision struggle to conceal their powers during dinner with Vision's boss and his wife. Now, it starts off, and this episode specifically had that sort of like, for me anyway, Dick Van Dyke, Leave It to Beaver, kind of. Not as much honeymooners per se, but you could see that it was definitely nodding to the earliest time period, when you're talking about sitcoms on television. And I did see those reports, Eric, that Dick Van Dyke actually did serve as a consultant. And I do feel like that Paul Bettany is definitely channeling Dick Van Dyke in his portrayal. Because when you look at how he's portrayed Vision in all of the movies, it's very, very different, kind of like his approach. And especially in some of the more, and it's interesting too, because if you notice, episode 1 has a little bit more physical humor, I felt like, and then episode 2 has more of the magical humor, which is why, again, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, the first one's definitely Dick Van Dyke, and the second one's definitely Bewitched. But it was interesting to me. I think the strangest thing about this is, in terms of like them revealing or nodding to things, I think the first biggest twist that causes us to pause and question what's happening, because we get that kind of like, it's like a toaster scene. Did you remember that, where it's like it's the Stark toaster and it's going to revolutionize like how you do things in the kitchen, and there's a glowing red light. And it's kind of, I was thinking it was kind of like M. Night Shyamalan. It's like, in Sixth Sense, like if they show us a color, it means more than what we think it means. So it's interesting because the toaster, depending upon how you view it, it could reference the idea of Stark technology, or it could reference the idea of Vision himself. You know what I mean? But then I also kept thinking with the blinking red light, and if you pay attention to the two people who are watching the commercial, the lady kind of looks a little bit kind of concerned or scared as the light is blinking. And I almost wondered if it was kind of more a nod to Wanda's actually origin that actually comes from Age of Ultron, where her and her brother talk about that, this bomb fell into their house and they were basically waiting, quote unquote, for Tony Stark to kill them. Right. And I wondered if it was kind of meant to kind of echo that in terms of Wanda's story specifically. But that's kind of our first clue that there's definitely something more going on. What did you make about that with the Stark toaster and the blinking red light?
I didn't notice that at all. I just thought it was like a funny, commercial. Like I thought, oh, this is kind of neat that they're doing like, genre type commercials or whatever. Like that's not the term I really mean. Like vintage, right? Vintage commercials. That's what I mean. That are kind of like dated. I used to watch Buzzer sometimes, which is a game show network. And what they used to do was they used to take some of the really old, like game shows, like What's Your Line? like the original stuff, the black and white stuff, and they would actually keep the old commercials in the broadcast, because back in the day, shows would have a specific sponsor, and so the commercials were literally like part of the show. Like they were actually done like, on a set off to the side of where they were filming, the rest of the show. That happened all the time. And I think that's kind of neat. So to me, that's what I more got from that. Was I just thought that was an interesting nod to that style, I guess, of doing commercials kind of within the show, because shows, like I said, used to have sponsors. And I thought it was cool that it was Stark Industries. So I didn't get the whole red light thing. That wasn't something that really registered with me. The things that actually registered more with me, as far as like the story, how do I put it? The story within the story, is the fact that that there's something wrong, because basically a Scarlet Witch and Vision are talking about the fact that they have no idea, how they got married. They don't have rings. And so you can tell there's like gaps. And I thought that kind of stuff was actually more interesting to me than the premise of the show, the actual sitcom that they were stuck in. Again, for me, I did not feel that Dick Van Dyke vibe. I felt it was much more like Bewitched. The whole premise of her, hiding her powers and stuff like that, and her almost getting caught, right? The boss's wife actually almost catches her. That was a premise of Bewitched, like all the time, was, the fact that she was, she was hiding her powers and hiding the fact that she was a witch. And of course, this is Scarlet, witch. So she's a witch, right? So she's hiding her powers. So, and I'm a big fan of Dick Van Dyke. That's the other thing is, and that's what was kind of weird to me. So, just for me, I don't know how I feel about the whole sitcom format. But I am more fascinated by the bigger story of, why are they here? What happened? Why are there sort of gaps in their memory? And I think it's cool what you pointed out, Dave, because I didn't notice that. And I think that is kind of fascinating what that could be a nod to. Like you mentioned, it could be a nod to Iron Man. It could be an indication of something else, regarding Scarlet Witch's origins, or ultimately what exactly is going on, because I am interested in that.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting because, because it's all black and white, whenever they show us color, I was trying to pay a little bit more attention to what was going on. And it's unusual too, because the Vision's boss is really pushing him, or pushing actually Wanda, tell me your story, tell me your story. And then he has this moment where he kind of chokes, and then, her demeanor kind of changes, and she tells him, Vision, save him, and then Vision clearly uses his power and then saves him. And then they kind of leave. It's interesting because part of the first episode is kind of making you question who is doing this to them. It's kind of like what you're wondering, or why is this happening?
Right. And there's also in that moment, it's interesting the way that the wife of the boss reacts to him choking, and you kind of feel like the way that I felt, it was almost like a computer buffering. You know what I mean? Like it got stuck. That's what I felt, and then all of a sudden, Scarlet Witch kind of comes out of it, right? She kind of comes out of the haze, like she kind of comes out of the television show for a second. Yeah. And all of a sudden she's like real again, and she realizes, hey, Vision, do something. You know what I mean?
Right.
But to me, it felt like that was just, because obviously, we're speculating here about what's going on. I felt like it was almost like a computer buffering, and it was stuck, and that's why he was choking and everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a little perplexing. I'm curious to see, as we finish the series, what's going to kind of come back to be relevant. You know what I mean, from that first episode. If that's good, I think the big reveal.
What's that?
Go ahead. I was gonna talk about another one of the big reveals, but go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. That's actually what I want to talk about too. So
yeah, I was just gonna talk at the end of the episode. We get a really huge reveal where basically we can tell that someone is actually watching them in the show. Now, I have heard all manner of rumors and speculation about who it is that's actually watching them, as these memories or whatever this is that's happening as unfolding. The general consensus seems to be that it is attached to Sword, which actually would go back to the Nick Fury end sequence at the end of the last Spider-Man movie, because Nick Fury's with Sword and he's working with the Skrulls or whatever. And so a lot of people are at least the general consensus is that Sword is the one who is actually potentially observing them, and that there's a lot of general fan speculation. A lot of people actually believe that it's Kat Dennings' character, Darcy, from basically the early Thor movies, which I really liked her character in the first Thor movie. And there's a lot of people that are speculating that that's actually Kat Dennings as Darcy, actually observing them in that little end sequence there at the end. So what did you think about that? Obviously, we know that someone is watching either these visions or these alternate reality, which is interesting, visions. This alternate reality, whatever, unfolding. So what did you think about that?
Well, that's the part that I'm most fascinated about. I'm more, I guess you could say there's sort of like an A story and a B story, right? There's sort of like the premise of the sitcom itself and whatever's going on there. And then there's obviously the bigger overarching story, right? Of what the hell is actually going on. Why are they like trapped in this sitcom world or whatever? What is actually going on? So I thought that was a really neat, interesting reveal to see that somebody is watching them. And somebody obviously, appears to maybe be kind of pulling the strings, So the biggest thing and that I was interested in, and I'm sure that you know better than me, Dave, is there is a symbol like on his paperwork. Do you know what the symbol is?
I'm going to be honest with you. I noticed there's a lot of symbols in the show. Some of them reflect back to Sword, but I didn't actually notice the symbol on the paperwork.
So there is a symbol, and I haven't seen direct speculation on what it is. I do know that there are people that I've heard Sword, and I don't know a lot about Sword personally, but I have also heard people that think it's Hydra. That possibly it's an agent of Hydra.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. We do have some really cool comments actually going on over here in the Rogues Gallery. If we want to put some of those up. Actually, John McGlay actually makes a really interesting point I hadn't thought of. He says, I feel like all the other characters on the show in the Pleasantville scenario are real people just like Wanda and are somehow being controlled, manipulated, which is why Wanda was so emphatic that Vision save his boss. That's a very interesting perspective to have and point of view. I hadn't even thought about that. Because I feel like there's a moment in the second episode where you can tell that definitely Wanda has a little bit more control about what's happening. It almost makes me wonder if this sort of sitcom scenario is sort of like a safety, like Wanda's created this sort of scenario to maybe even help protect these people while they're being manipulated, or maybe this scenario is actually helping to keep them safe. You know what I mean? Because it's interesting too. Well, we got to get in the second episode to get further into my theory. But it's very interesting. I hadn't quite thought about that, John. That's a great point to make. That maybe the people in the Pleasantville scenario, that maybe most or all of them are actually real people. That would explain why Wanda is so emphatic when she tells Vision to save his boss. Because if it is just a figment of her imagination, why would she be so specific? It's a very interesting point.
It is an interesting point, and I do want to point out, John, that I hadn't considered that because for me, I felt like it's the opposite. Personally, I thought that this is like these aren't real people. You know what I mean? We know basically Vision's not. You know what I mean? He's dead. So it's like I actually thought it was the opposite, but I do like your point, John, because I hadn't considered that.
It adds a whole other level of dimension to the storytelling if it turns out that these people are actually real. Because we know from the trailers that Sword or whatever this group that's outside of this dome or whatever, this area that's being affected, and we know this from the trailers, there's an area being affected. It would be interesting if it turns out that that's actually an entire town that's been affected. And if this whole fictitious thing that Wanda is kind of putting these people through, if this Pleasantville scenario, if this is Wanda's attempt to actually protect the people of this town. I hadn't even considered that at all. That's a very interesting.
Neither had
I hadn't even thought about that.
I had the complete opposite take on it, but I think it's an interesting theory, John. And obviously at this point, your theory is as good as ours,
And then Robert says, he says it gives it a bit of House of Val Vista
That's in reference to another project that Rob and I are working on. It's called The House on Belle Vista. And it's actually in reference to another project that Rob and I are hoping to get into.
Interesting.
Fortunately, there's not a whole lot I can say about it.
No, don't. If it's something you guys are
just
developing,
he would just throwing that out there. It's just it's a film premise that him and I have been working on.
Well, that's interesting. So let's go ahead and go into the second episode if that's okay, because I feel like the second episode definitely has a lot more kind of big, shocking kind of reveals. So the synopsis for the second episode, which is just titled Episode 2, because even the titles of these episodes, they don't give you any hints what in the heck's going on. Episode 2, the synopsis basically states, in an effort to fit in, Wanda and Vision perform a magic act in their community talent show. Now, this is the one that I love this opening sequence. I thought the opening sequence was really, really cool. Definitely Bewitched, right? Like it's very clearly a Bewitched kind of thing. And what's interesting about this particular opening sequence, if you pay attention, is there's some kind of interesting things that they've kind of put in that opening sequence. If you're like a comic book fan, during the opening sequence, they actually show what looks like the Grim Reaper's helmet actually stuck in the floorboards of the house when Vision is phasing in between things. When Wanda is actually in the supermarket, if you're paying attention to a lot of the things like in the background, like the stuff that's on the walls, there's all these nods to all this kind of comic book history and sort of the comic book story of Vision and Wanda. Because for those people who are maybe been introduced to the MCU primarily through the movies, they may not realize that Wanda Maximoff in the comic books is actually the daughter of Magneto.
Right. Yeah, I actually knew that.
Yeah. And in addition to that, Wanda is one of the earliest mutants, actually going back to the 60s, because she was actually a part of, Magneto's, Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, right? Like that she was one of them, as well as Quicksilver, her brother. So she started off as a villain, daughter of Magneto. And Vision's history is interesting too, because just kind of like in the movies where Vision is an amalgamation of different things in order to create him. But it's a different kind of people that are involved. Actually, the original Ant-Man, Hank Pym, is involved in the creation of Vision. It is kind of slightly connected to Ultron. But what's interesting is that a lot of Vision's personality is an imprint from another character called Wonder Man. So it's interesting because if you look in the background, there's like little like Wonder this, Wonder that, and it's not just Wonder Bread. I feel like they're actually nodding to actually Wonder Man. And Wonder Man's brother is actually the Grim Reaper. And so there's a lot of classic Avengers stories that always start off with the Grim Reapers showing up and, trying to basically, he's always in conflict with Wonder Man and Vision at the same time, it seems like. Like there's just like this constant like circling of these different characters. So it's interesting. If you look at the opening credits, you can see the Grim Reaper's helmet. So there's all these weird little nods to things in the opening credit, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily hinting at anything we're going to see, but that's what started me down my trail about, wow, it's a real shame that they didn't do an Adventures of Superman thing and actually have Vision be a superhero. So we could have actually seen him fight the Grim Reaper, you know what I mean? Like in a little opening sequence and had it have sort of that Adventures of Superman kind of special effects of the day and kind of little bit of fun, right?
Yeah.
And then it'd be interesting too, because I thought it was interesting how they're definitely hiding their powers, but they're also hiding a little bit of their like superhero identities from people. They don't want them to know that they were these superheroes either. It's interesting. It's just a lot of stuff going on. So in the second episode, obviously they're getting ready for this magic show. There's stuff all over the place in this one. Like if you look at the magic box, what's in the box? The magic box, it looks like it has the Infinity Stone on it, the soul gem or whatever it is that Vision actually had in his head that Thanos actually ripped out of his head when he killed him in the movies, is on the box. There's stuff all over the place in this one, but I think The first big thing is that we keep hearing this banging. The episode starts off with this banging, and they kind of have this like, what is that? What is that? What is that? That banging. And then later on in the episode, one of the big reveals is Wanda hears that sound and she looks out, and there's this helicopter. It's like a toy helicopter, and it's stuck in these bushes. She picks the helicopter up. Number one, it's in Iron Man's colors, right? It's a helicopter. It has the sword logo on it. That's that little weird logo that's actually on the helicopter. And I was really confused by this. I was confused by it because it's Tony Stark's colors, but it has the sword logo. Because unless I'm mistaken, when I originally was reading about the sword as the organization, most of what I read about in the comics, when I was reading, it involved a lot of stuff that involved the X-Men and the Beast, which is Hank McCoy. And that's how it's kind of introduced actually to Sword, was actually in the pages of X-Men comic books of all things. So I was really kind of confused by the helicopter. I'm not exactly sure the significance of it is, beyond the fact that it's a nod that there's something outside trying to get in. I mean, I understand this idea, but beyond that, I was a little thrown off because I don't immediately get what the helicopter is supposed to signify. What about
John,
you, Eric?
John has a really cool theory. So John says, I think that was a real helicopter that tried to infiltrate the town and then was turned into a toy. I like that, John. I think that's an interesting theory.
Well, if that theory turns out to be true, there's a lot of speculation that Mephisto actually has a hand in what's going on too. So it's going to be really interesting because Wanda's story touches on a lot of interesting concepts and ideas. I do feel like that Agnes in the show, I do think there's a generalized belief or theory that she is supposed to be Abigail Harkness or Agnes Harkness or whatever it is, and actually as a character that in the comic books actually helped train Wanda and how to actually use her abilities. Wanda is incredibly powerful. We've barely seen this in the movies, but in the comic books, I mean, she's got a power level the likes of which, no one, I think the only person that would come close would, be Thor or even Doctor Strange. But even then, maybe.
Well, I've heard people say before that Scarlet Witch is the most powerful character in all of Marvel. I've heard people say that before.
Yeah, so she definitely could turn something into a toy, but I've heard all this rumblings and speculation that Mephisto has something to do with this. Wanda's story actually touches on characters such as the High Evolutionary. There's so many directions and so many things that could be revealed through the course of this. I know a lot of people are hoping that there's a classic storyline called House of M, where at the end of it, Wanda basically utters the phrase "no more mutants," and all the mutants in the Marvel Universe disappear. I know a lot of people are hoping she will utter some kind of expression that causes mutants to suddenly exist, so it'll bring the X-Men in. So there's a lot of ways this could go, but I do like John's theory. That's interesting because it could have kind of explained it. But it's interesting, too, because that means that Wanda may not have intentionally turned it into the helicopter. So maybe it is either the organization or the group or the being that's causing all of this that she's trying to protect the people from. Maybe that whatever turned it into I don't know. I was really confused by the helicopter. I didn't quite get it. So and the coloring made it even weirder for me because I was like, I didn't understand what that meant. So as we go forward in the show, I'm really curious to see what's going to be revealed.
Well, to dovetail off of what John was saying, my theory is very similar to John's in that I felt like it was kind of like reality creeping in somehow. And that's what the color is supposed to symbolize as well. Is like, it's kind of like reality creeping in. So like, I didn't necessarily think what John thinks, and that it literally was like a helicopter infiltrating the town, and then it was just like turned into a toy. I thought it was more like a sort of a symbolism of the outside world kind of creeping in. That's the way I took it.
Right, and that's what I thought the banging symbolized, was that it was the outside world trying to break in. So as this happens, we see them preparing for the talent show, and the talent show has been put on this one lady, this blonde-haired lady. I can't remember her name. And she is kind of like sort of the queen bee, if you will, of the neighborhood.
She's the town bitch.
Well, that's the way to put it. So they're going over there to meet with her and kind of have their strategy session and of like what they're going to be doing for the talent show, right? And kind of get all their ducks in a row or whatever. So they go over to have the meeting, right? And this is another one of the big reveals. Towards the one of them is, and I didn't know this, but apparently, depending upon what you want to call her, Monica Rambeau, I still think of her as, Captain Marvel, because when I was playing the Marvel superhero role-playing game back in the 80s, she was the Captain Marvel at that time. I know she was called Photon at one point. Like, she's had a lot of different names. Again, another really, really powerful character. I guess it's supposed to be Monica that's actually there at the little get-together. And there's an interesting symbolism because there's been a lot of speculation and people pointing out the fact that she's got this little brooch on her jacket. And then the brooch actually is the symbol of when Doctor Strange opens a portal. So that could have just been like a little touch, or it could be telling us something. I'm not sure. But the big, big reveal, though, is that Wanda and the lady who's organizing the talent show, that she's trying to tell her, she's like, look, what I'm doing is not meant to hurt anyone or whatever else. And she's definitely trying to kind of talk this lady down because she has like a weird reaction as she breaks this glass in her hand. And then we see color again because we see the lady's blood in her hand. And then we get this this message coming over the radio. And it's weird because the voice, to me, I didn't immediately know who the voice was. I do believe there's a general theory that it actually is a character that we've seen in the other Marvel movies. But amongst my friends and people I've been talking to prior to doing the show tonight, there was a lot of people that felt like it sounded a little bit like Chris Evans. But in hindsight, I don't think it is. But basically, this voice over the radio is saying, Wanda, who's doing this to you? So it's clearly someone trying to contact her and try and figure out or deduce what is going on. So it's another example of the real world trying to basically enter into this vision, this dream state, whatever this is that Wanda is wrapped up in, and basically make contact with her. And it's interesting, too, that she clearly states to the lady who's organizing the talent show, I'm not trying to hurt anyone, which I thought was interesting. What did you make of all that, Eric?
It's really confusing. I am fascinated by that whole aspect of the story. Again, like, there's sort of like the A story and the B story. There's sort of the premise of the sitcom itself, right? Which is, that they're doing this talent show to benefit the local school. And then at the same time, Vision has this weird quirk where he swallows a piece of gum and apparently it like makes him malfunction and act like he's drunk or something like that, which I thought was kind of weird. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I feel about the whole sitcom situations. You know what I mean? Like they're a little cheesy to me, but I am very fascinated about the bigger overarching story of who is that person on the radio. And honestly, I have no idea. I didn't pick up on the fact that it sounded like Chris Evans. I was trying to kind of feel like, does this sound like somebody, from the MCU, one of the actors or whatever? And I couldn't really think of anybody. So I'm really fascinated by that. And who is that? Is this an established character? Is this a new character that we're going to be introduced to? Who is it? And also, how is it that they're able to break through? You know what I mean? How is it they are able to communicate through whatever's happening, whether it's a simulation, like you said, a dream state, whether it's an actual alternate reality, which I kind of feel like, it is, but at the same time, we did see somebody's observing this. So that's kind of weird too. You know what I mean? So it is fascinating to me. I as far as who that is, how they're kind of getting in there, how they're able to communicate with her. And obviously I think it's going to be something that's expanded upon, and I'm looking forward to finding that out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, but again, that's one of the big reveals. We do get another one of those commercial breaks, and they basically definitely give us a Hydra callback with this Strucker watch, which actually, again, Baron von Strucker, we see at the beginning of Age of Ultron. I think that's he's seen actually before then, but that's kind of like his big moment where we kind of get the most of him. And Baron von Strucker, was a part of a very big Marvel miniseries, like back in the late 80s, early 90s, and is, obviously attached to Hydra. And it's interesting because I've been wrapping my head around what in the world this is supposed to symbolize, because it's time, right? Time, because it's a timepiece, it's a watch. And they say that you're never complete without your Strucker, which we know Baron von Strucker had a hand in manipulating the energy in the MCU version of the origin of Scarlet Witch, and basically giving her powers, because she's an augmented person. She's not a mutant in the current MCU, even though those of us that are diehard comic fans who've loved these characters since forever, we all know Wanda as not only being a mutant, a very powerful mutant, and actually being one of the earliest mutants, an early, basically, villainous character that fought the X-Men. And so it's interesting. And I had a hard time trying to figure out what I thought this meant, other than I got the idea you're not complete without your Strucker, because without Baron von Strucker, Wanda Maximoff wouldn't have her powers. But I didn't understand the time, like it being a timepiece or being a watch. I didn't understand if there was any additional meaning in terms of what it had to do with the story, other than I'm just rambling and I'm wasting time. Eric, what did you think about that? Did you get any significance out of that at all, or?
No, I mean, I other than the Hydra thing, obviously that's something that, that comes through. It's an obvious thing. Obviously, it's an obvious thing. Obviously, I mean, it's the Hydra thing. That's the biggest takeaway I had from it. But interestingly enough, as you're talking about it, it does kind of, I'm wondering if it does tie in to the later reveal, right? Because there's a later reveal after all this where someone does appear to be infiltrating the world, right? Somebody actually comes out from the sewer, right. And Wanda, the Scarlet Witch has this really crazy reaction. Like, this is not good. Like, she knows like something's wrong, and she actually does reverse time. So I'm wondering if that's sort of the connection, because she does actually reverse time, and obviously in the commercial it's a timepiece, so that I could see a connection there.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. So
I just started thinking about that as you were talking. Like, that's
it's that I hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting observation that I hadn't actually put together. So again, the show goes forward. They do the magic show. We continue to move forward. They win an award. There's a lot of different things that could be nods to different stuff. But the next really big reveal is the one that Eric has already mentioned, and that is where they're out on the street. This manhole cover opens up. This guy crawls out of it. He's like a beekeeper. He's got bees swarming all around him. He has a logo on the back of his workman's overalls, coveralls, or whatever. And Wanda has a very, very, like you said, intense. It's just like in the first episode, where it's like she snaps out of her fictional reality, and then she's kind of herself again, and she has to do something or use her powers or whatever, like what we saw in the last one, where she's very specific. Vision save him. And this one, she says, oh shoot, now I'm blanking on it. She just says something like no, doesn't she? I can't remember exactly what she says. I can't remember
what she says either. I can't remember exactly what it.
I
just remember the reaction, and it's very similar to what happened with the choking. You have this sense that Wanda is now all of a sudden, like, the real reality is kind of creeping in, and she kind of is recognizing that, she's getting that simulation part of it, which you get the sense that she doesn't want the simulation to end, or the dream state, whatever we're going to call it, right? You get that sense that Wanda wants this to keep going, which makes sense, right? Because Vision's here, right? And Vision's dead. So here she's got Vision, who she's in love with, right? And so you get the sense that she wants to keep that going. So when something like that happens, you realize that she's kind of being taken out of it for a second, and suddenly she's kind of like, the real reality is creeping into her head. So I find that really interesting. And obviously she thinks it's a bad thing. There has to be some sort of symbolism, I would imagine, about the beekeeper suit and all that kind of stuff, but I have no idea what that would be. Obviously, there's something to that. I have no idea what that would be.
And I've watched some speculation videos and some different things trying to see if anyone has any theories about that. Some people think that it's a call back to this, older Marvel, villain character or whatever, which I don't think it's that. That to me, that seems kind of silly. But
what character do they think it's a callback to? Just curious.
I don't remember the character's name. It's not one I was terribly familiar with. But
the beekeeper.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Okay. I think they're saying it relates to a character called Swarm, and there's been a lot of characters that have been called Swarm in the MCU. Although the most notorious version of Swarm, I think of actually from Spider-Man: Amazing Friends, it's clearly not a nod to that at all. But what I think of in that moment is because a beekeeper, you know what I mean, is kind of maintaining and keeping the hive and keeping it all together in order to harvest things from it. It definitely has sort of like an ominous tone. You know what I mean?
I like that. That he was coming in to harvest something. I like that.
Yeah, I that's what I think. I could be totally off base, could be totally wrong, but her reaction when she's kind of like no, and she kind of rewinds time. Very clearly, his arrival is bad.
Right.
And she doesn't
at least bad
want
for her
that to happen. Yeah, exactly.
For whatever it is that she's wanting or whatever her kind of like agenda is, which is difficult to ascertain. He doesn't fit into that, obviously. Right.
And then after that kind of moment, our next big reveal is towards the end of the episode, and that's basically where the room starts to change, color starts to come in, and it's very clear that the show is moving into a Brady Bunch is what I thought of in terms of the color scheme. It's definitely sort of like it's interesting because a lot of people are immediately going to 70s, and I could kind of see 70s, but there was some color sitcoms in the 60s. Bewitched was color at one point, so I don't think it immediately means
as well.
Yeah, so I don't think it immediately means that we're going right to the 70s. I mean, we might be. But in my mind, anyway, I could see the kind of the more Brady Bunch idea, but color kind of enters into it, and then the big thing is it turns out that Wanda appears to be pregnant, and that's kind of where we leave it. They kind of have a kiss, and then we get the recall again, like the last one. Someone is still watching, right? So what did you think about all this, Eric? I mean, it definitely feels like that Wanda is kind of rewriting the reality and moving the story forward in some manner. But why she's doing it, I have no idea.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting is this to me tells us why we got 2 episodes. You know what I mean? This is the reason that we got 2 episodes. I feel like the producers, or Disney themselves, the executives made a decision here to say, you know what? We don't want to leave them with the black and white, because I can kind of feel them thinking, are people going to like this or not? Right. And the rest of the show obviously is going to be in color. So I think that's the reason that they had these 2 episodes packaged together, is they wanted to show us that, yes, the rest of the show is going to be in color. Right. Which again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. If you're one of those people that liked what they were doing, well, now they've made a major change, right? In terms of going from that classic black and white, sitcom type thing. Now they're going to color. So that makes me wonder about the fandom and whether people that were like, whoa, I love this show. This is so great. Well, it's like, now you're going to have this big, huge change, right? So it's like, are people going to respond to that one way or another? I don't know. I mean, I don't really like the whole sitcom thing, to be honest with you. I just feel like the sitcom thing is like, I feel like it's a parody of a sitcom almost. You know what I mean? That's just the way that I feel about it so far. But I am interested to see what they're going to do in terms of like the next type of show they're going to do. Like you said, maybe it's going to be Brady Bunch, and maybe I'll like that a little bit better than I like the other 2. We'll just have to see, because again, it's always going to be like a show within a show, and either you're going to respond to it and like it, or you're not.
Well, it's interesting because as it moves forward, I'm beginning to wonder, are they going to give us nods? Again, like I said, going back to superhero characters adapted to live action, on television. As we move into the 70s, that's when we start hitting, Marvel's some of their most memorable, live action attempts, and some of their most successful attempts, where the legacy, for example, the legacy of the Incredible Hulk show with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno looms so large
Right.
that I feel like sometimes it hampers, trying to bring the comic book version of the Incredible Hulk to the big screen, because
Right.
people's memories, the Lonely Man theme and all that are so strong that it sometimes it almost taints trying to adapt that character, because that's what people know, that's what they understand. So as
that's like the definitive version of the character to me, because that's what I grew up with. I didn't read the Incredible Hulk comics, so I for me, the first time that I saw the Hulk was that television show, and then the next version that I saw was the cartoon, the Saturday morning cartoon they had that was
right.
at the same time as like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. So it's like it definitely kind of defines the character for me. I would be interested to see if they did something with that. I don't know how it would fit. You know what I mean? Like, because it seems like they're very sitcom heavy. You know what I mean? Like, it's always sitcoms, so I don't know how it would fit.
I got a great scenario for you, though, that would be amazing if they did it. I would love it if they did it. If the moment that breaks kind of breaks the reality, and we go from like this fictional created manufactured thing into like the actual real world, if in the process of someone breaking in, we get a replay where the wheel, one of the wheels gets blown out in the car, it gets flipped over just like the Incredible Hulk, and maybe the kids are trapped inside, and Wanda and Vision are struggling to break the kids out of the car, and we get those nods to the Incredible Hulk. I kind of got chills. That'd be awesome. Like,
that would be awesome.
That would be a fun way to nod to the Hulk and not spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
But if they use that as the moment that kind of breaks through, the fictional into what we think of as more the real MCU, that's kind of cool too, because the Hulk was Marvel's first real breakthrough into live action. That was their first big, really huge success, was the Hulk television series. That says a lot. If they were to do something like that, I'd clap. I'd be like, hell yeah, that's pretty awesome. Well, so we'll see what they got planned. But as we move forward, that's my only thing, is I would like to see them, again, as we're moving into the 70s, I'd like to see a little bit of nods to, Marvel's history on television. Because, whether you did or did not like, the Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man show, the Red Brown Captain America, or whatever, I do feel like that the Incredible Hulk looms large, and I do feel like they should do something to nod that, because that was their first big television success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think you have a great way of making it fit. I love that premise, and that would be a great nod to the show, and a great way. Actually, it would just be like a great way to end the whole thing. But it'll be interesting to see whether they do that or not. It'll be interesting to see if they actually do get into drama at all, or does maintain sort of the sitcom reality, or not.
Well, and again, I think the Incredible Hulk show is your kind of your touchstone moment, if you're going to do a callback, because if you think about it, when you watch the original Hulk pilot, which I still love to this day, in my mind, is still the best version of the character. I'm sorry if anyone wants to burn me at the stake for saying that. But I do feel like that's your amazing moment, because if you remember, the pilot starts with almost a sitcom-y kind of thing, because Bill Bixby was whether you're talking about My Favorite Martian, whether you're talking about what was the show he was in that was a little bit more dramatic? I can't remember the name of it now. But anyhow, Bill Bixby was a television star. He was the big name on the original Hulk television series. And you have, when the pilot opens, it has that sitcom-y kind of moments where almost like there's like this Buster Keaton like silliness, you know what I mean? Like it feels like a sitcom setups, with them in the rain and kind of being playful, David Banner and his wife. We're talking about the pilot, right? That's why I'm using the term David Banner, not Bruce Banner. We're talking about the Hulk TV series. There is that almost sitcom-y kind of opening, and that's when we get to that moment where the car wreck happens and all the drama and the tension comes in and the tone of the pilot changes, and that's when it gets somber and it carries that mood forward for the rest of the Hulk pilot. I don't know. I think there's something interesting there. We'll see if the the people that are producing WandaVision, if they're thinking about it in those terms, if they want to nod to that moment in Marvel's history or not. I'll be curious to see. I, for myself, that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for, is if they're going to do anything to actually salute and celebrate Marvel on television as we move, obviously, from what seems like 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s, into the 80s and such, because that for me, that's that sweet part where Marvel began to break through with live action, and not just comic book fans became to know a little bit about the Marvel universe.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I really like your premise there. And by the way, Jane is in the house, and she mentions it was Eddie's father's TV show. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah. That's it. Thanks, Mom. So if that's good, I think we're going to move on from WandaVision.
Well, do you have any other? So no other speculation about anything that's going on, or predictions, or anything like that?
Well, I know from the trailer that we're going to get somehow Monica Rambeau is going to be brought into it. She's either going to have her powers or have her powers at the end of this series. I think that's pretty much foregone conclusion. So I'm curious to see, because they're not going to call her Captain Marvel, even though to me Monica Rambeau is Captain Marvel. So I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do all that. I'm curious to see how they're going to do that. Beyond that, I'm going to be honest with you. There's so much speculation about X-Men stuff. Wanda is so deeply rooted into the mutant side of the Marvel universe and the X-Men. I just hope we're going to get something that's going to introduce the X-Men and mutants into the Marvel. That's what I hope is going to be the outgrowth of this. I know we're going to get this multiverse idea. I know Marvel's going to totally steal DC's thunder before they get around to it. That's what they always do. But I just hope that we get somehow the introduction of mutants into the Marvel universe during the course of the WandaVision series. That's my only real hope. As far as predictions for what's going to happen, I really don't know. Like I said, I'm completely lost. I'm grasping at straws with my theories. So I would just think I would like to see a nod to Marvel television, from the 70s and 80s, because that's when they had their big successes with the Incredible Hulk. I'd like to see that. I want to see how Monica gets her powers, if she already has her powers. And I want to see somehow the X-Men introduced or hinted at during the course of the series. Beyond that, I honestly have no friggin' idea what they're doing. I'm completely lost.
Well, I think obviously what they're doing is, as you mentioned, is they're introducing the whole concept of the multiverse. This is going to have some relevance to that, whether this is actually a different universe or not, or whether it's a simulation. We don't know yet, but there's going to be something with that. I'm very curious because I know, at least I've heard, I shouldn't say I know because it's rumor and just stuff that I've heard. This is supposed to all lead up to the Doctor Strange movie and the real sort of like introduction of the multiverse. So I think something's going to happen with that. Whether Doctor Strange is actually going to be the one that maybe gets her out of this, or maybe he's the one that's doing this, I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see whether he actually does show up. But I think that's where it's all gonna end up leading to that. It's basically that sort of introduction, so that when the Doctor Strange movie comes out, we kind of know what's going on.
And the title of that show that Bill Bixby was in was actually The Courtship of Eddie's Father. Okay. That was the name of the show, Courtship of Eddie's Father. So I'm kind of hoping that, again, like I said, we nod to the Hulk TV series, because I feel like it's important and significant. But and I agree with you, Eric. Definitely the multiverse obviously is going to be introduced to this. I'm just curious to see how this is all going to play out. I honestly don't have a lot of obvious predictions because, like I said, I'm lost.
Do you think that this is a simulation, or do you think it actually is some sort of alternate reality?
I think at the moment it's probably a simulation, but by the end of the show, something's going to happen, and all of a sudden she's going to cause the multiverse. It's going to split. It's going to break. And I think at that point it will be alternate realities. At the moment, it might be a simulation, but before the end of the show, I think it is going to be alternate realities. So that's what I think. I think we had a bit of a slowdown there on the stream.
Yeah, we had a hiccup there, so I lost a little bit of what you were saying. But yeah, I kind of agree. I think I agree with you. So I think right now what we're seeing is some sort of simulation, but eventually what's going to happen is, because of her powers, that it's going to become like a real reality or something like that. And it's like you said, it's going to cause, ramifications. And I would think the whole reason for it is because she doesn't want to lose vision. That's very clear. That's what's going on, in my opinion, that when you see the hiccups in the stream, if you will, that basically that's what's happening is she does not want to give up vision. So I feel like she's going to somehow bring him back, but it's not going to really be him, right? It's going to be like an alternate version of him, right? So because obviously he's dead. So you know what I mean? I think that's what's going to lead to the multiverse.
Well, and one of the comic books I have, we've been talking about how I'm going to start getting stuff CGC slabbed and graded. One of the books I have set aside is actually West Coast Avengers, and that's the one where Vision returns back from the dead, but he's kind of lost all of his emotions. He's kind of like Data, and that's when you see, at least in my mind anyway, one of the classic versions of Vision where his costume has no color in it whatsoever. And that's because when Wanda asks him, why is there no color in your suit? And it's because he doesn't understand what the point of color is anymore. It's irrelevant to him. And that's kind of where their relationship kind of, breaks and fractures and kind of ends, is because he's basically not the man that she knew anymore. He's something else. So I feel like they're definitely going to have to nod to that in this show. If
that makes a lot of sense. That'd be really interesting too. You know what I mean? If that's what ultimately happens, like she's able to sort of bring him back, but he's, not the same. That would be really interesting.
I wonder if maybe that's kind of what's happening at the moment. Maybe she is somehow in some aspect of his consciousness or something, and is trying to bring him back, and it's caused some of what we're witnessing. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where this is all going.
It's fun to speculate because this is a weird show. I mean, this is definitely a show that's just perfect for speculation, because who really knows what's going on until we get that big reveal at the end. Right.
And then looks like let me get back over. We do have another comment. Oh yes, John.
So tragic.
So tragic. I agree. That was a big. I loved that. That was probably, I think, when I was my most voracious Marvel reader was actually during that time period. I loved all that stuff. I was reading West Coast Event, and that time period in comics, I feel like, is something that we're seeing with a lot of the Marvel shows right now. Because if you think about it, Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think we are getting the introduction of U.S. Agent. And U.S. Agent, he was a really important character in that quote unquote new era of Marvel. That's when we had the Gray Hulk return, who eventually became Mr. Fix-It. That was the Silver Centurion, the red and silver version of the Iron Man armor. That was, Vision with all the color out of him. And he was like Data, and he couldn't relate to humans anymore. And he lost all his emotions. And, it kind of fractured his relationship with Wanda. I feel like a lot of these things we're seeing play out, harkens back to that time. And I feel like that's kind of where we're leading to. But I'm just curious how much of that they're going to try and introduce through WandaVision and actually through the Disney Plus shows. Because it definitely feels like they're trying to usher in that quote unquote new Marvel, kind of idea. When you look at the shows that we're getting and the characters that we're seeing, they're not what we think of as your A-list characters. It's not the Iron Mans, it's not Captain America. You know what I mean? It's not Thor. We're following Vision, we're following Wanda.
The irony is, I always considered Iron Man a B-level character.
Well, he was.
You know what I mean? That's
for a time. But when you look at the Avengers, Iron Man's always been a very central, key, important character, for the Avengers. He's all, it's funny because Captain America I think of as the quintessential Avenger, but Captain America gets introduced much later in the run, and he actually replaces the Hulk if you actually read the original Avengers comic, which I always recommend people who are interested in stuff definitely go check out and read the original comics, because they're a lot of fun, and it's interesting to see what the history of the Marvel universe was versus what we're actually seeing play out in the shows and the movies.
It's also interesting to see what it is that they decide to pepper in the MCU, because obviously they take stuff from the comics, but they change them. The Civil War is a great example of that. Like, there is a Civil War comic. In fact, it's a huge, it goes through all the different characters, and it's a big event, right? It's a big event thing that happened in the Marvel comics. The MCU's take is very different, but obviously, it was inspired by that,
I could totally rescue that Planet comment you just made about Pepper. and talk about how it relates to a lot of things happening in Marvel Comics and the MCU, but I'm just going to let it go. For those of you who are paying attention, you just got every single reference I just made. Okay. All right. So at this point, do we want to go ahead and segue into pop culture? Because we're at 120. We're
Yeah,
way
it sounds
over.
good to me.
All
You
right,
can
cool.
go ahead and, unless anybody else had a little bit of speculation or anything.
Yeah,
like
if
that,
anyone else has some speculation, Rogues Gallery, go ahead and shout it out, and we'll be happy to come back to it while we're actually going to the pop culture segment. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the pop culture news segment. I think kind of explains itself, and since we're a little over, basically we're going to be talking about things that are happening in the world of pop culture news. We hope it's anything that you find worthy of discussion that you will hopefully enjoy discussing with us. That's what we like to cover here in the pop culture news segment. So I want to start off with this, if that's okay, Eric.
Go ahead.
I want to start off with the pop culture news because we got some big news, and I want to show off a couple things here real quick. We have another Moon Knight Rising update. That's right, folks. Another Moon Knight Rising update. Again, big shout out to James Stone. He and I contributed and created this artwork here that we've got here for our Moon Knight Rising update graphic here on the Retro Rogues Live. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I want to show these off real quick. And again, I need to shave. I know that. I know it's really bad. One of the things I've talked about is I'm going to start getting my comics graded and slabbed, and I've been in the process of picking up some key and important Moon Knight comics, kind of here and there. So this was a big one I picked up recently. This is Werewolf by Night. This is 33. I looked at it because I have a bad habit of flubbing live on the show. But this is actually Moon Knight's. This is his actually second appearance. You can see, you barely kind of tell. He's actually fighting Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night, on the cover. We've got the early version of the Moon Copter there in the background. It's a very important Moon Knight issue. I'm very happy to have this in my collection. Super excited. And then another one that I recently picked up too. This is Werewolf by Night 37. See if I can get this in here. And you can see Moon Knight right there, again, fighting Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night. This is why I'm excited. Well, part of the reason I'm excited about Moon Knight is because I do feel like that Moon Knight is going to introduce us and lead us into kind of the more occultic, supernatural side of the MCU. This is why I think that we're going to get characters like Blade introduced, and why I think it's going to be interesting too, because they are going to play with the psychology side and the fact that, at least I believe, that Mark Spector has a mental illness. And I could see where part of that kind of leads into the fact that he's going to possibly be telling new stories about, on his earliest missions as Moon Knight, he fought a werewolf and no one's going to believe he's real. And then I think they're going to give us an actual werewolf reveal. So that's, I think it's so fun, is because I think they're going to use Moon Knight as a conduit to take us into that sort of supernatural aspect of the MCU. And we're going to realize that, werewolves and vampires have been here the whole time and we didn't realize it. So that's one of the things that has me excited, really super excited about Moon Knight. Now, along those lines, let me go ahead and pull this story up here real quick. I wanted to touch on this. This is not, at the time when I originally saw this story, was so excited to talk about it. And at that time, it was breaking news. It is no longer breaking news. People have already been talking and speculating about this already. But I want to go ahead and bring this up here on the show because this is big news I want to talk about as it relates to Moon Knight. This is actually coming from the Hollywood Reporter. Headline says, Ethan Hawke to play villain opposite Oscar Isaac in Marvel's Moon Knight. I am so excited about this. Ethan Hawke is one of the main characters of one of my favorite movies, Training Day. I love that movie. I watch that movie constantly. It's always kind of on rotation. I just love the powerhouse performance by Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke, and the story is interesting. I just always liked that movie, so I was super excited to see this. It says, of course, Isaac is top line in the show, featuring one of Marvel's cult characters that is aiming for a March production start in Budapest, which, again, filming in Budapest, there's Marvel connections there because of the event in Budapest they talk about that happened between Black Widow and Hawkeye. Ethan Hawke has made his Marvel. This is making his comic book adaptation and superhero debut. Hawke has closed a deal to join Oscar Isaac in Moon Knight, Marvel Studios series on Disney Plus, sources tell the Hollywood Reporter. Hawke will play this series' lead villain. Isaac is top line the show, which is aiming for a March production start in Budapest. May Kalmaway, again, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, apologies, who is perhaps best known for her work in Hulu's Raimi, is also already on the roll call. A lot of speculation. A lot of people believe she's playing Marlene, which is the Moon Knight's, girlfriend. Other people believe she may be playing a second villainous character too. So we'll have to see how that kind of unfolds. Moon Knight has had several incarnations over the decades since his debut in 1975, from being ex-Marine turned mercenary with multiple alter egos to being a conduit for the Egyptian moon god Khonshu, to most recently a dapper consultant in the modern comics era. One them of the story. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. That's a little confused there. Anyhow, the point of this character does struggle with multiple personality disorder. They say it's unclear who Hawk would play, but Moon Knight's arch nemesis is a villain named the Bushman. I don't believe he's going to be playing Bushman. I really do not believe that. There's a lot of speculation right now. Some people say they believe he's going to play Dracula, that they're going to introduce the Marvel's version of Dracula, and that Ethan Hawke may actually play that character. I think he could totally pull that off if he really wanted. I'm kind of hoping for, maybe someone like Black Spectre, who's sort of like a dark, alter, like evil version of Moon Knight. You know what I mean? There's a lot of crazy villains, though, that Moon Knight has fought, including characters like the Hatchet Man. There's all these interesting characters that Ethan Hawke could be playing. So very excited about this. You probably heard this, Eric. Again, I recommend people go to the Hollywood Reporter if you want to read this particular story. But again, super excited about Moon Knight. Super excited to hear that Ethan Hawke has been added to the cast. You'd already heard this, right?
I had, yes. I did hear. I didn't hear much about it other than he had been cast. I actually didn't know that he was going to be a villain. I didn't realize that, which is interesting to me because I'm trying to think. I can't like at the top of my head think of a villainous role that Ethan Hawke has ever had before. So it's kind of interesting to me that he's going to be taking on a role like that. My favorite film with Ethan Hawke in it is actually Dead Poets Society. I love that film, but he was really young back then. So he played completely different kind of parts back then. He was usually kind of like, back then he used to be always kind of perfect for that shy, introverted kind of person. And as his career has, taken off, he's gotten into more roles. But I can't think of any villainous roles that he's had. Can you?
Nothing comes to mind, but I don't think this would be the first time he's played a vampire either, because I seem to remember he was in some kind of a movie where like vampires ruled the society. I was trying to figure out what the name of it is, and I can't remember.
I feel like it was like Daybreak or something like that. Maybe somebody in the Rogues Gallery remembers. I watched that movie, and actually I thought that was a pretty good movie because it was just kind of like a really interesting premise. Basically it was like the vampires had basically taken over. So like human beings were basically kind of going extinct because they were basically oversaturating the blood supply, which is human beings. They basically were they were basically, killing everybody. They were running out of blood. It was an interesting premise. It was an interesting movie. And he did have kind of a weird role in that, you know what I mean? But he wasn't villainous though.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like I said, I can't think of immediately off the top of my head something he played in that where he was the villain. But I'm just saying, if it turns out the rumors are true, and if it turns out that Ethan Hawke is actually playing, the MCU version of Dracula, which I've got a whole bunch of Tomb of Dracula trade paperbacks back here on my shelf too, which I'd be super excited about that. If that is what he's actually doing, it's not the first time he's played a vampire. But I don't know. I'm generally curious. I like Ethan Hawke as an actor. I'm just excited that we've got such a great cast attached to Moon Knight because I'm such a Moon Knight nut. So I'm just excited to see the character being brought. And that's the thing for a lot of people who may be not familiar with Moon Knight, is I've been telling Eric the whole time, Moon Knight has always been very much considered to be Marvel's version of Batman. He's got a tricked out helicopter. He's got gadgets and stuff that he wears. He's got an outfit with a cape. He sticks to the shadows. It's a very much, Marvel's Batman kind of idea. One of his identities, Stephen Grant, is like I think back then was a millionaire, but now it would be probably a billionaire, a multi-billionaire. And so it's the same idea, rich playboy by day, superhero at night. But the only problem is he's schizophrenic. So he's also like a a down on his luck cab driver, Jake Lockley. And he's also ex-mercenary Mark Spector. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play this off and how they pull this together. There's a lot of potential with Moon Knight. So it'd be interesting to see, what direction they take it in. So
it'll be interesting for me because I'm not familiar with the character at all. So I'm curious to see, because this will essentially be my definitive version of Moon Knight.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm really excited for it. So we'll see. We'll see how it comes together. What do you have up first for this week's installment of Pop Culture News, Eric?
All right. So we've been talking a lot about the Snyder Cut. So there is some Snyder Cut news that's come out that I think is pretty interesting. I do think this has been out for a while. Like, this article is 3 days old. But this is from GamesRadar.com. And it says, Zack Snyder confirms his Justice League will be released as a movie, not a miniseries. And I don't know if you had heard about this, Dave. I think this is really kind of weird and interesting. So apparently somebody just asked, Zack Snyder directly on the internet whether his Justice League cut was indeed going to be a miniseries or it was going to be a big long movie. And he says it's going to be a big long movie, apparently 4 hours long. And this is really weird because at the DC Fandom event, they specifically said that this was going to be a miniseries because it is so long. It's 4 hours. So the idea was that it was going to come out in 4 parts and essentially be a miniseries. Well, now we're just going to get this big long movie. And also along with this is there's all sorts of rumors that Zack Snyder is actually pushing for a theatrical release, which is interesting because, of course, HBO Max has started this weird model where they're releasing their films both in the theater and on their platform at the same time. Obviously, they did that with Wonder Woman 1984. And apparently, Zack Snyder wants to get in on that. But I don't know how a 4-hour movie would work in the theaters, during a pandemic. I don't know if this is the height of hubris or what. Do you have any reaction to this, Dave?
Well, I feel like, and I've read a lot of these stories too, I feel like that what's happening with the Snyder Cut is that I feel like Warner's or AT&T or whoever, they're moving forward with this because it's kind of like an interesting way to market HBO Max. You know what I mean? Like, from a marketing ploy standpoint, because it has such a diehard fan base. But I think because we'd heard that too, speculation that maybe they might release this in parts because it's 4 hours. We had heard that.
But it wasn't speculation. That was announced at DC Fandom. That was an official thing that it was going to be released as a miniseries.
Well, I think that what we're seeing now is with the release of Wonder Woman 84, with what's happening with the decimation of DC, with AT&T making the cuts.
The decimation of DC.
Yeah. I think that what we're seeing here is I think this is Warner's walking away from the quote-unquote Snyderverse, because there's been a lot of talk about this. People were speculating and excited about the idea like, he'll come back and do Justice League 2, and there was talk about like a comic book series that tied into the Snyderverse, and there was all this talk about all these amazing things that were going to happen once the Snyder Cut hit. I feel like all this stuff is signaling everybody. I hate to shock you, but I feel like after they drop this Snyder Cut version of the Justice League, Warner's is walking away from this, and this is it.
Well, that's the official party line. That's straight from the mouth of the head of Warner Media. I did see a story about that came out last week. They straight up said that this is this is just a one-shot deal. But I still have to think. I mean, obviously, we've talked about how AT&T does some really strange things, right? They've made some really questionable business decisions. But I can't imagine. I really just can't imagine if it's a big hit, they're going to do something with it. They have to. They can't be that dense. You know what I mean? Success breeds success, right? So it's like if it works, it feels like they have to do something with it. And also, we keep talking about this, that DC is behind the curve on this, but they obviously want to do it. DC has its own multiverse as well. You know what I mean? So you could have the Snyderverse and still continue, down the path that the what's I guess referred to as the DC. What is it, the DCEU? I don't even know what the terms are anymore. As far as
they never.
DC does so many different universes. It's crazy to me. I can't keep track of it. I've never understood why Warner does that. I really don't. Because, you know, obviously the CW is like its own thing. You know, then you have something like Gotham that's completely out there on its own, right? And then you have, you know, what they're doing in the movies. And now you have a divergence here, right? And obviously the Flashpoint movie, right? The Flash movie is going to, you know, solidify that multiverse, right? Like they're going to have the Michael Keaton version of Batman. That's been like confirmed, you know, it's going to be the Michael Keaton version of Batman, you know, how he is today, but it's going to be connected to this multiverse. So again, I just feel like if it's successful, they got to do something with it.
Well, here's kind of my hot take. So one of the things they tried to show us in the CW, you know, Crisis event was that all of this stuff is connected. And I do feel like that obviously with the films moving forward, it does feel like that there's obviously some very clear decisions made specifically in relation to the Flash movie where they want to do that, right? With the casting of Michael Keaton, you know, there's a lot of talk that Ben Affleck's Batman may also be in the film in some capacity.
I think that's confirmed. I think that's not a rumor. That's confirmed. That's going to be his last. In fact, I think he said this is the last time I'm going to be Batman, because there was speculation that there might actually be like some sort of Batman series on HBO Max with the Ben Affleck version of Batman, which was another interesting idea. Again, that was kind of, I think, where we were starting talking about that whole Snyderverse concept. But as far as I understand it, Ben Affleck has basically gone on record as saying, no, the Flash movie is going to be my last time.
So I want to roll this back just for a second, because you're correct that they have quote unquote announced that. But if we go a little bit further back in time, they also had that big event with Kevin Smith, you know, and they announced all kinds of stuff that ain't going to happen now. So all I'm going to say is that, again, with what's been going on since AT&T took control of Warner Brothers and DC Comics, I'll believe it when I see it. But, and I'll say this too, I've already said this, I'm a diehard DC guy. I used to do work for DC Comics. I love DC Comics, you know, some of my favorite characters, some of my favorite, you know, just characters of all time. You know, talking about Batman, Green Arrow. Like, I love Green Arrow. I'm a huge Flash guy. Like, I mean, I love these characters. So I'm very excited for what they're going to do, and I hope they do the multiverse idea. The only thing I'm saying is that by the time they get to it, Marvel will have already walked this ground and maybe circling back, because they're already actively rolling stuff out right now. It looks like it's tapping into the multiverse. So by the time DC actually starts filming, you know, Marvel will be done with this concept. So just like they always do. But anyhow,
and I have to add, because this is my thing, I always say it, and there's still the possibility also that Star Wars will also do this first. I still think that this Favreau-Filoni verse is going to happen, because they feel like they've got to fix the whole situation with Baby Yoda. Because if you follow the Disney continuity, Baby Yoda is going to die. He's going to be killed by Kylo Ren, and I don't think they want that. So I think you are going to see a Favreau-Filoni verse, and it's going to be introduced with like the Ahsoka show, or the Rangers of the New Republic, you know, that show, or the Boba Fett show, because they've got so many things going, and they're going to happen. You know what I mean? That stuff is happening.
Well, and there's a lot of people who talked about that. Obviously, the Veil of the Force idea that's gonna come into play in the Ahsoka show.
That's a big Doomcock thing, I think. Actually, Doomcock talks about that.
Right. So we'll see how this all unfolds. All I'm saying is, in relation to this, I'll believe it when I see it, one. And number two, they're very clearly sending the message to all the fanboys that no, once we're done with the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League, we're done with all this nonsense. We're not coming back to it. I thought they're very clearly trying to tell everyone that once they have said that, we're done.
They have said that. They're on record saying.
But what I'm saying is, I think they're trying to quell all the speculation that's been going on. People like, oh, if they do this, then they'll do that, and then like they're just trying to basically, you know, just say no, we're not. We're
I think that they're trying. My personal opinion is, I think they're trying to lower expectations just a little bit. That's my personal opinion. You know what I mean? I think that they want to kind of just see what happens. You know what I mean? And then go from there. I mean, that's the way I would do it. I don't know if that's actually what they're doing, but I feel like that's what they're doing.
To me, this all reeks of exit strategy. Like I feel like that once they're done with this, they want to make sure everybody understands we're not doing this again. because there's been a lot of calls in the fan community for the David Ayer cut of the Suicide Squad movie. So I'm just telling you, they're very clearly trying to send the message. No, we know you're all speculating, having fun with this, but once we're done with this, we're not coming back to this. This is over.
And that's exactly why I think it's the opposite.
I think they're done. I think they're done. I could be totally wrong with this, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I think they're definitely done with this. I feel like they spent more wrapping up this version of the Snyder Cut than they intended to spend, and I feel like they're definitely going to be done. That's my opinion.
Yeah, we'll see. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Right. I just tell you, I think I'm right. Okay.
And I'm just disagreeing with you. That's all. I have a different opinion.
You have a right to my opinion, though. All right. So, all right, cool. So let's, if it's okay, I've got the next one here real quick. So, go ahead and add my screen in. So this is my second pop culture news story for tonight. I'd not heard about this website before, the NME. This is just the most recent version of this story. Again, this is an older story. It's been breaking for a little while. We've talked about it before on the show about the new Battlestar Galactica series. It's in production. Eric and I are both big Battlestar Galactica fans. Definitely a classic. I'm a huge classic Battlestar Galactica fan. I know Eric's huge classic Battlestar Galactica fan. I quite liked the Ron Moore version of Battlestar Galactica though too. I really love that version as well. So here on this website, the NME, like I said, this is just the most recent version I could find of this story. This is by Charlotte Kroll. And basically, the summation of this is there's a lot of talk about the release strategy for the new Battlestar Galactica show. So the headline reads, "New Battlestar Galactica series to experiment with release strategy like no other show," producer reveals. "We may dump 3 episodes in a row because it's a 3-episode long battle sequence," which that sounds to me like Blood and Chrome. All right, which was on Machinima, I believe. So, which I thought Blood and Chrome was pretty good. So the new Battlestar Galactica TV series set to launch on Peacock will likely play with the unusual way of releasing the show's producer has said. Sam Esmail, creator of Mr. Robot, said he plans to break the mold. Wow, that's not how you spell mold. Mold of how TV series are usually aired by releasing 3 episodes per week or several in one go, depending upon the narrative of the story. Stressing that this revival of the sci-fi show is not a reboot of The Last Incarnation, obviously meaning Ronald Moore's version, Esmail told Collider that fans can expect something different. For me, it was like, let's get in there and tell the right story, and it will tell us how many episodes. Now, I'm about to comment on this after we get past this. "We may dump 3 episodes in a row because it's a 3-episode long battle sequence that needs to be dropped in a row, even though there are 3 signifying chapters, and maybe each chapter is switching a point of view within that battle sequence," he added. Okay, all right. So let me just stop and tell you right now. If you take 3 episodes in a row and you release them at the same time, I think that's called a movie. Okay, you can break it up however you want. All right, you can call it whatever you want. Okay, but unless there's like, I don't know. You tell me, Eric. I mean, that's what I feel like. It's like if you've got a super long battle sequence told from different points of view, and let's say it takes, anywhere from 2 hours to maybe even 3 hours, that just sounds like a movie. It sounds like to me that the pilot is just, like a back in the day, the pilot episode would also be a movie of the week. I keep talking about this. Why don't they just call it movie of the week? Why don't they just go back to how they kind of have a little fun with how they used to do stuff with the movie of the week was the pilot for a show. I don't know why they feel like they got to we're going to do this unique release strategy. No, it doesn't sound like it. It just sounds to me like you've got this story that basically should just be a movie of the week, and that's the pilot for the show. You just don't want to call it that. It sounds like spin. What do you think, Eric?
I agree with you 100%. 100%. It's hype. It's spin. I mean, the fact of the matter is, this is already happening, right? We just talked about WandaVision. They released 2 episodes at the same time, right? I mean, they've already done this. Mandalorian did it. You know what I mean? Where they released 2 episodes within the same week as well. they did it for like scheduling purposes and things like that, because like, for instance, with the Mandalorian, it came, Disney Plus came out like on a Tuesday. So they had the first episode of the Mandalorian, and the second one was available on the following Friday. But still, this stuff has been done. You know what I mean? And you even go farther back. You're talking about like the movie of the week premise, and the way that they used to do pilots, and when pilots were movies, which it was the case with both incarnations of Battlestar Galactica. A little plug here: we reviewed the Ron D. Moore miniseries that started Battlestar Galactica, and they called it that. It's called a miniseries. In fact, they didn't know a series was actually going to happen, right? That was the whole point of doing a miniseries. It was basically like kind of a soft premiere, if you will, right, for the show, because the show wasn't happening yet. They wanted to see what kind of reaction they were going to get, so they actually did a miniseries, right? And that's what they called it. So I think a lot of it is all like trying to kind of reinvent the wheel, and they're trying to look for new ways to kind of put spin on this. You know what I mean? And that's what it is. It's just like the term reboot. It's kind of a meaningless term.
Yeah, I just thought I'd like to call that out. And understand, I'm not disparaging this retooling, reboot, relaunch, whatever the heck you want to call it. I love Battlestar Galactica. I'm excited to see what they're going to do with this, whether it ties into the Ronald D. Moore version or not. I'd personally like to see more allusions and callbacks and nods to the original Battlestar Galactica myself. Just because I love more of how they took a lot of the Egyptian iconography. I guess it's pretty obvious I'm a big Moon Knight fan. Like, I love all the Egyptian stuff. If you look at some of the design work actually for Red Skirts, you can see a lot of callbacks and nods to that. So I am personally excited about this Battlestar Galactica reboot, relaunch, whatever you want to call it.
It's a remake, right? It's a remake.
Yeah,
that's
remake,
what it is, right?
Call it. But
I personally wish, because we've already gotten, two different versions of Battlestar Galactica with, different versions of the same characters and things. I would really like to see something different. I would like to see like the Cylon War or something like that, but I don't think they're going to do that. Yeah,
I don't think they're going to do that either. But I do, like I said, I do like the idea of this new version, and I'm excited to see what they do with it. And yeah, if you're going to say break the mold, that's not how you spell mold. All right, so anyhow. Sorry, I got to call that out. That's pretty bad. All right, so what else do you have for pop culture news, or do you want to move over to streaming?
I think we should go ahead and move over to streaming wars.
All right, cool. I have a feeling that you'll probably have the better of the two streaming wars story. Do you mind if I go ahead and go first?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, cool. So set up real quick, and then I'll jump right into. I do actually have a story for this evening. So, so the streaming wars segment, we're just talking about anything that's happening in relation to the various streaming video services. Specifically, we're talking about things like Hulu, obviously things like HBO Max, or even some of the free services. Whether you want to talk about things that are ad supported like Peacock, whether you want to talk about things like Tubi. This is what we're talking about. This is what we mean when we refer to the streaming wars. So for tonight, I do have one quick thing I wanted to cover that I thought was interesting. All right, so this is over at The Verge. This is actually from today. I thought this was interesting. So, and I hadn't had a chance to really get into this too much, but the headline reads, "The fight to make Netflix and Hulu pay cable fees." And this is by Addie Robertson. It says, a Georgia lawsuit is pushing to expand TV franchising rules. So it says here, streaming services are slowly turning into cable TV, complete with bundles, an ever-growing list of channels, and a reinvented TV guide. And a series of lawsuits could portend the return of something even worse, the hidden cable fee. 3 municipalities in Georgia are suing Netflix, Hulu, and other streaming video providers for as much as 5% of their gross revenue in the district, joining a nationwide group of towns and counties that want these services regulated more like cable TV. It's a small but growing front in the war over cord cutting, challenging regulators to decide which matters more, the increasing role streaming services play in American media diets, or their significant practical differences from traditional television. All right, so they get a little bit further into it, talking about the federal lawsuit, what's actually going on over here on The Verge. It's a very interesting story. I say if you're interested in reading this, I like to push and encourage people actually go and read the story that I'm actually talking about. So, Eric, tell me, what's your reaction to this? What do you think about
I'm shocked. I didn't know about this, and I think that this could be a really interesting front of the streaming wars. This is breaking news to me, and I'm kind of shocked in a way, because it's like, what are they really doing? Well, what are they doing? I'm thinking they want money. They want a piece of the action, and they're trying to figure out a way to do that. And it sounds to me like they're going about it all wrong. This sounds like this would be a terrible thing for consumers, like an absolutely horrific thing for consumers. And, obviously, like I said, they're motivated by money. It's always greed, it seems like, right? That motivates these things. You have a budget shortfall, so this is their solution, of these municipalities. I used to work for a municipality, by the way, so I do kind of understand this stuff and how they operate and the crazy things they do. Like the municipality I worked with, they had a unique situation where they actually provided power to a significant portion of the city. And they used to jack people's electricity all the time when they had a budget shortfall, and it was really effed up. You know what I mean? That's the kind of crap they do. You know what I mean? Because, hey, it's government. We don't get political on this show, but it's government, and government's wasteful. I'm just going to tell you, that's the bottom line. Regardless of the party, they're always wasteful. And that's what it sounds like to me. I'm kind of appalled. I'm kind of appalled and almost like a little bit angry, because I was a cord cutter before the term was invented. I basically came to this conclusion. I've said this on the show many times before, but, I had this moment where I was all like, I can't be paying for internet and cable. That's insane. You know what I mean? I don't understand how people do that. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, I'm just like, I had to make a decision. And so I went ahead and said, you know what? I'm not going to do cable anymore. I actually use DSL. So, I get my internet actually comes through the phone line. It doesn't come through the cable. So I don't do cable at all. You know what I mean? And, I decided I got an antenna. I talk about that all the time. I have an antenna. I watch Heroes and Icons, really cool digital sub channel. They've got all the Star Trek stuff up to Enterprise. I watch Comet. Comet has Battlestar Galactica on it, the Ron D. Moore version. It has Stargate on it. It has all sorts of cool shows on it. I use my antenna more than I use Netflix, but this just seems like just greed and mismanaged cities that need more money.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised and kind of shocked when I stumbled upon this, doing research for tonight's show. And because it's interesting, because I don't bring many streaming war topics here to the show. And I thought, you know what, I need to go out and find one. So I was doing some research and kind of poking around. And
this is a big one. This is pretty good, Dave, because I hadn't even heard of this.
I was kind of shocked at it. I was honestly a little shocked. So obviously this affects a lot of us. We're talking about Disney Plus at the top of the show. This kind of stuff could cause a lot of us to have to pay even more, lamenting the fact that they have to pay what they need to pay, for a lot of these different services anyway, because by the time you get about 3 or 4 services, it's almost like you're paying what you would be paying for cable anyway. And now people are looking for a way to tack another fee on top of it. So
exactly,
definitely go check this story out. Obviously reflect upon what this means for you. I just thought it was interesting, and like you said, Eric, it's not a huge shock. We got a budget shortfall. Who can we squeeze money out of? Well, those streaming services sure are making a lot of money. Let's get some money out of them. So
yeah,
here you go, everybody. Here you go.
Everybody wants a piece of the pie.
Yeah. This is why we can't have nice things, right there.
Exactly. Now, this is a front we definitely got to keep our eye on in the streaming wars.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, that was my streaming wars for tonight. What do you got?
All right, so I had a couple, but obviously we're kind of pressed for time at this point. So first thing, because I've been wanting to do this more, and I want to do this regularly, because I was a big advocate of this. I was a big pusher of this, and as a commentator, right, as someone who does reviews and things like that, I've really wanted this. And the funny thing is, I see so many speculation things from different other people that do review shows, and they'll say this show is successful, this show isn't, this is what I heard. Well, look at the numbers, because we have numbers now, and that'll tell you whether a show is successful or not. Okay, so these are the Nielsen ratings for the various shows. This is from the time period of December 14th to December 20th. So it's not current, just so you understand that. It's we're going back in time a little bit because that's the way the Nielsen's work for the streaming services. But I wanted to point this out. Look at what number one is, Dave. Number one was The Mandalorian, and it's the only non-Netflix show in the top 10.
Oh, sorry about that. That's interesting. I mean, I'm not too shocked. It was interesting because I had been preparing my show notes, and I was trying to take one of them out, and I actually deleted all of them. And I think I had something that was talking about this, that based off of these numbers, that the Mandalorian, had actually surprised and actually surpassed what people thought it was actually doing. But I'm not surprised. That Return of Luke Skywalker is a big deal. It's a big deal. There's all kinds of people talking about it, including people that were even sort of a little bit lukewarm on the new season. Everyone was excited to see Luke return. So I'm not surprised, when you're going to take, one of the most beloved characters from Star Wars and put him with the new, most beloved character from Star Wars, the Grogu Baby Yoda. I'm not surprised, but it is interesting to see that we actually have numbers that actually supports that. And I'm shocked to see what number two is, though.
Isn't that interesting? I want to get there, by the way. I want to get there, but I also want to go back because remember, we declared our winner of the streaming wars for 2020. Yeah. And we are vindicated because we said it was Disney Plus. And at that time, The Mandalorian was just showing up on the top 10, which is the reason that I kind of gave it the edge, was because they were there, right? They were the only non-Netflix show that was on the top 10. But now it's confirmed that they achieved number one status. So Disney Plus really is showing that they've got some weight, right? They are the competitor for Netflix. In fact, the other article that I'm not going to get into, that was part of it, was they were talking about Netflix in their quarterly earnings report. They actually said Disney Plus is our competitor now. So everybody's kind of acknowledging what we said, that Disney Plus is like the winner right now. They are like the contender. You know what I mean? They're the number one contender. Netflix is definitely number one in terms of viewership, right? And subscriptions. But Disney Plus, even Netflix is now saying, we got to watch these guys because these guys might take us out. You know what I mean? Or these guys might take away from us. They're the ones that they're concerned about. But what you were just about to say, the other prediction, remember, I had was, remember I said my streaming service to watch, the one that, you got to keep an eye on because of one thing. And it's the number two on this list. Number two on this list is The Office. But when this list came out, The Office was still on Netflix. And my streaming service to watch for 2021 is Peacock, which is where The Office is going, and where The Office is right now, as of us talking right now.
Right, and I was just talking about too that one of my my last of the pop culture stories, I was talking about how excited I was for the new Battlestar Galactica, which is also going to be on Peacock. Right. So yeah, I could totally see that. That's a huge deal. And then I think it's interesting too. Number three, The Crown. I was talking about how much my wife and I like The Crown. So there's another big, and that's a Netflix original series.
Right, that's a Netflix original series. I mean, there's no doubt Netflix is number one, right? I mean, just in terms of subscriptions, in terms of, obviously you can look at this list. There's no question.
But a lot of these things on here, Eric, they're not Grey's Anatomy is not a Netflix original programming. Supernatural, that's a CW show. It's interesting that people are probably watching Supernatural more on Netflix than they are on the CW app. Criminal Minds, that's not a Netflix show.
That's sort of the Netflix bump. You know what I mean? That's actually a term they use. You know what I mean? There's a lot of shows that were actually basically unsuccessful, or very moderately successful as far as when they were airing, but they got a huge bump on Netflix for whatever reason. It's kind of a weird thing. I don't understand the Office phenomenon, even though my daughter actually loves that show. I don't quite get it, but it is super popular for whatever reason.
Well, and my wife and I, we quite like The Office. It's just a kind of funny, silly show, and we actually just recently finished because my wife wanted to go through and actually rewatch all the episodes of The Office before it left Netflix, which I thought was kind of ironic because we were talking about it here on the show here. And yeah, it has officially left now, and it's gone over to Peacock. And it's weird too because it's like you can just go over there and watch it over there. You know what I mean? But I did enjoy going through and actually rewatching The Office. I've always enjoyed that show. I feel like Parks and Rec is probably a better show, and it's by the same people that did The Office. But The Office is that was the breakthrough hit, big, and I'm surprised to see that it's still there. People are still talking about it. It's obviously still doing really well with the different audiences, and people are still enjoying rewatching it. So.
The funny thing is, honestly, the only show on this list that I watch is The Mandalorian. I don't watch any of these shows. So what do I know?
Yeah, well, for me, of the stuff that's on the list, Mandalorian, The Office, and The Crown. My wife and I, we watched all of those. The Crown's really great. That's a Netflix original series. Everything else that's on this list, I've seen an episode or two of Grey's Anatomy, but not on Netflix. I've seen the promotional teasers for The Manhunt, but I haven't watched any of that. Supernatural, I've seen a couple episodes actually on CW back when I used to watch regular cable, but I haven't seen any since then. I'm not even sure what Virgin River is. Criminal Minds when it first came on because I was a Mandy Patinkin fan. Again, I watched that on the original network. Schitt's Creek and California Christmas. I don't know much about those. So yeah, I've seen the top 3. I've watched all of those, but the rest of these, I'm not watching on Netflix or anything else. So
I just think it's funny when you have actual numbers.
Yeah.
And I also like to point this out because there actually was some news as far as CBS All Access and the actual launch of Paramount Plus. I think they actually have a date now that's set for that. But I want to point out that the Nielsen's apparently do not include CBS All Access in their numbers. According to this, it says it's only Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Hulu, and Netflix. And the way that I take that is CBS All Access is so pathetic, the Nielsen's don't even care about them.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that.
I don't know any. That's what I take from it. That they are just so pathetic, they don't even care. You know what I mean?
Well, and and all I'm going to say is that I just kind of surprised. I'm kind of because most of the stuff on here that's really a ratings winner for Netflix is not a Netflix original show.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And a lot of people talk about when they talk about Netflix, they talk about the original programming coming on Netflix. Yeah, I really like Ozark. Ozark's going to be coming to an end with this new season. So
what's really funny about this, and this really does show you how streaming is different. This would be like, the traditional Nielsen's back, the broadcast era. And of course, we still have broadcast TV. As I mentioned, I still use an antenna. But this has become kind of the equivalent of like, in the top 10 is like reruns of Gilligan's Island. You know what I mean? Like back in the day when those things were syndicated and stuff like that. Or the original Star Trek show. It really, when you think of it in that context, it's like, that wouldn't make any sense at all. And yet that's exactly what's happening on streaming.
Well, for me, it's like finding out that the most several years ago, like what the most popular show on television at one point was NCIS. And I'm like, who in the hell even watches NCIS? So for me, it's like that. So
yeah. But I just think that's so weird. You know what I mean? Because think about that. Think about like if when we were growing up, if that's how popular, like Gilligan's Island or the Brady Bunch or something like that was, shows that are in reruns and all that kind of stuff, and they were actually in the top 10. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, well, that's part of the reason they, that those shows stayed in syndication for so long is because they were ratings winners. They were a great way to fill programming holes, and people still watch them. So it's interesting. So very cool. Do you have anything else you want to cover for tonight, or are we good to go ahead and go to the outro?
I went ahead and touched on it. So I guess Paramount Plus is officially launching on March 4th. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because that is CBS All Access's like big hope. As far as like programming and stuff, it's very thin, so obviously, and I'm just going to say it, Star Trek Discovery and all this other stuff, it's not working. It's just not working because they're in trouble and they're trying to figure out a way to fix this. And right now, the only thing they got is changing their name to Paramount Plus. Kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this all shakes out. That's kind of the point of the Streaming Wars segment. So
exactly.
Cool. All right. So if that's good, we're going to go ahead and go to the outro here real quick for the show. I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty, and I have been one of your hosts. If you're curious to check out some of the fun things we have over at my t-shirt company, Kirby Tees, definitely swing on over there and check it out. You can see what we have to offer currently, as well as possibly consider getting a custom t-shirt or even purchasing a Retro Rogues Live shirt and supporting what we're doing here on the show. We would greatly appreciate your support. That's over there at kirbytees.com. That's KIRBYTS.com. I want to thank you again for watching, and I want to thank my great co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander, for being here and obviously providing his unique perspective, which sometimes differs from mine, but I'm always glad to get to hear it. So tell Eric, the folks, where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I'm most active on Twitter. You can find me at BaseGod14. So that's at BASSGOD14. My DMs are always open. So if you have show suggestions, hey, if you have rumors or news or something like that you think we could cover on the show, please let me know. That is also the official Twitch is BaseGod14, and then also the official YouTube, which is like totally buried right now. And actually, we have been trying to get better about this. We need to tell folks, hey, if you like the show, please tell people about the show. Please like it, give it a thumbs up or whatever platform, that you're using. Share it, with your friends. Share it with your enemies. Share it with everybody, because we really want to expand the show. And we feel like a lot of times we're kind of buried underneath the algorithms. So please check out the different formats, whether it be like I said, the Twitch or the YouTube, Facebook. We're on Twitter as well. That's again at BaseGod14. So please support us that way, and please just tell people about the show, because we love your comments. And speaking of your comments, Jane says, another great show, guys. We appreciate that. Hollywood Jackson also says, great show, guys. We really appreciate that. And with that, we will leave you with the last word.